I am sitting on the hardwood floor of my parents' living room in Denver, Colorado, surrounded by curls of torn wrapping paper and that sharp and artificial scent of a Christmas tree that has been up since the 1st of December. My sister Amber is twirling a set of car keys in her manicured fingers, the metal catching the light from the twinkling garlands strung along the mantel, and she is squealing, spinning on her toes like a child instead of the 32-year-old woman she is. My father is beaming at her with the unfiltered pride of a man watching his favorite work of art be admired by a crowd. My mother has clasped her hands underneath her chin like she is witnessing something holy. Out in the driveway, visible through the living room window, sits a Ferrari California in glacier white, gleaming under the December sky with an enormous red satin bow on the hood. The kind of bow you see in car commercials. The kind that probably cost more than my round-trip flight from Austin to Denver. And then I look down at what is sitting in my own lap. A small envelope, that usually comes attached to a bouquet of gas station flowers, with my name written on it in my mother's handwriting. Inside are 3 gift certificates, the paper kind, printed on cardstock, to a discount home goods chain. Each certificate is worth $5. My mother leans toward me with the bright and encouraging voice she uses when she is trying to make something small feel significant. There are 3 of them, sweetheart. $15 total. For your apartment. Something to make it feel more like home. My fingers feel distant from my body as I hold the little stack of certificates, their edges perfectly aligned, paper clipped together with a small gold clip someone took the time to attach. The price tags are still printed right on the certificates themselves. My father waves his hand in the magnanimous way he has when he is especially pleased with himself. It is the start of your decorating fund, he announces. You have always been so sensible with money, not like some people. He winks at Amber, who makes a theatrical face of mock offense. They both laugh. My mother fills the silence that follows by explaining that Amber needed a car that reflected her brand as a creative professional. She does freelance graphic design, and that her clients expected a certain level of presentation when she arrived for meetings. Amber drops onto the couch beside me and the cloud of her expensive perfume arrives half a second before she does. She pats my knee with the tender condescension of someone who has been performing the role of generous sister for so long she has forgotten it is a performance. Don't stress about it, Ellie, she says, using the nickname only she uses, the one I have never liked. I'll drive you wherever you need. That little Toyota of yours must be running on prayers by now. The Toyota she is referring to is a 7-year-old Camry that I drove 7 hours through mountain passes and a stretch of genuinely frightening black ice to get here. The Toyota I paid off myself, on time, 3 years ago. The Toyota that has never once left me stranded on the side of a highway. I cannot breathe. That is the most accurate thing I can tell you. Sitting there on the floor of the house I grew up in, holding $15 in paper gift certificates to a discount shop while my sister's Ferrari sits in the driveway wearing a red bow, surrounded by torn paper and ribbon. I feel the full, staggering weight of 34 years pressing down on my sternum like something solid. Because this is not a surprise. This is not an oversight. This is not a bad year. This is the pattern. This is exactly the pattern, rendered this Christmas morning in its most cartoonish, impossible to ignore form. And there is something I have been waiting all morning to tell them. Something I rehearsed at every rest stop on the 7-hour drive up from Austin. Something I had imagined them hearing with the kind of pride that I have spent 34 years wanting from them. 2 weeks ago, I was promoted to senior structural engineer at the firm where I have worked for the last 6 years. I have been designing buildings, real buildings, buildings that will stand in this city for 50, 100 years, and I was just given a title and a team and a salary that would make my father's jaw drop if he ever asked about my life long enough to hear the answer. I had imagined telling them over Christmas morning coffee, watching my mother's face change, watching my father look at me, really look at me, and think, she did something remarkable. Maybe this Christmas will finally be different. I had whispered that to myself somewhere near Colorado Springs, watching the mountains appear on the horizon. Maybe this time. I set the envelope and the 3 certificates on the coffee table. The paper makes no sound at all. I say, excuse me. Bathroom. My voice sounds like it belongs to someone standing at the far end of a very long hallway. I walk upstairs without running, past the wall of family photographs where Amber's face anchors almost every frame, and I lock the bathroom door behind me with a soft click that feels like the quietest possible punctuation mark on something that has been a very long time coming. Before I tell you what happened that night, and what I did, and everything that came after, I want you to do something for me. If you have ever been the capable one, the responsible one, the one who was told you didn't need anything because you always figured it out, hit that like button right now. Because what I am about to describe is not just my story. I know that. I have known that for a long time. And I want you to know you are not alone in it. The bathroom mirror showed me a face that was dry-eyed and too composed, which told me everything about how deep this had actually gone. When the hurt is new, you cry. When it has been the air you breathe your whole life, your body stops registering it as something to react to and starts treating it as the baseline condition of existing. I pressed my palms flat against the cold marble of the sink counter and I stood there for a while, feeling the specific, physical weight of what I can only describe as the moment you stop being able to pretend. My name is Elaine Morrison, though most people call me Ellie. I am 34 years old. I am a structural engineer. I have designed load-bearing elements for 3 commercial buildings in Austin and contributed to a hospital expansion project that won a regional architecture award last spring. I have never once asked my parents for money as an adult. I have never missed a loan payment, never overdrafted an account, never called them in crisis. And I have spent the better part of my adult life quietly, carefully buying their love in the only currency they seemed to value from me, which was competence. Reliability. The dignified invisibility of someone who never caused problems and therefore never needed to be thought about. Amber, my younger sister by 2 years, has always operated under a different economy entirely. I want to be careful here because I am not interested in making her the villain of this story. She is a character shaped by the same family that shaped me, just shaped differently, in the way that one piece of clay can be pressed into softness and another into something harder by the same pair of hands. But I want you to understand the architecture of our childhood, because it matters for everything that comes after. I am going to give you just a few examples, not the full ledger. There are 34 years of entries and we would be here until New Year's. Just a few. My 5th birthday. A small gathering at the kitchen table, 2 friends from the neighborhood, a sheet cake from the grocery store bakery, the kind with the slightly waxy white frosting and the generic floral piping. The following year, Amber's 4th birthday, a princess-themed party with rented decorations, a pony, an actual pony, in the backyard, a 3-tiered fondant castle cake, and 30 children from her preschool class wearing coordinated party hats. When I asked my father why the parties were different, he said, "Your sister needs the social stimulation. You have always been more independent." I was 5 years old. I filed that word away, independent. I did not yet understand that in our household, independent meant you don't need us. And that being told you don't need something is a remarkably efficient way of never having to provide it. My high school graduation. I was valedictorian. I had written a speech about persistence and the particular quiet satisfaction of finishing what you start. The family section of the auditorium had 2 empty seats in it when I walked across the stage, because Amber's junior varsity soccer team had a game in Colorado Springs that afternoon, and my parents had driven her there. My father called during the reception, from the parking lot of a high school in another city, and told me they would watch the recording. The VHS tape sat unwrapped on my dresser for 4 months. My mother's explanation, delivered some weeks later with the complete confidence of someone who had already decided this was reasonable: "You always succeed without our help. Ellie, you never needed us cheering. You would have been brilliant regardless. You always succeed without our help." Their elegant way of converting neglect into a compliment. College. I worked 25 hours a week at the campus bookstore and the dining hall throughout all 4 years. I graduated early, in 3.5 years, because the faster I finished the faster I stopped needing to stretch the scholarship. My student loans, when I graduated, totaled $67,000. Amber was 2 years behind me in school, and by the time she enrolled, the money had apparently reorganized itself. She studied art and graphic design in Boulder, fully funded, tuition and housing and a semester in Barcelona for what my father called her artistic development. I found out about the Barcelona trip through a Facebook post. When I mentioned it to my mother, she said, "Your sister needs to find herself." And then, with that serene confidence, "You've always known exactly who you are. Known exactly who you are." Their way of saying, "You don't deserve exploration." I am not telling you these things so that you will be angry at my parents on my behalf, though I understand if you are. I am telling you because context is everything. Because what happened on Christmas morning this year did not fall from the sky. It was the logical conclusion of a very long sentence that my family had been writing my entire life. Standing at the bathroom sink with my hands on the cold marble, I let myself feel the full shape of what had just happened downstairs. Not the shock of it, there was no shock, not really, but the particular, crystallizing sadness of having hoped anyway. I had driven 7 hours. I had bought them gifts, careful gifts, gifts that required months of small sacrifices to afford: a leather folio for my father's desk at work, the kind he had admired in a magazine and mentioned once and forgotten, a silver bracelet my mother had paused in front of in the window of a jewelry boutique on Pearl Street the summer before and said nothing about because she was not the kind of woman who said what she wanted, a professional camera lens for Amber, the specific model she had mentioned in a group text 2 months ago, which I had written down on my phone so I would not forget. I had wrapped everything carefully. I had brought them in a separate bag because I did not want them crushed in my luggage, and I had planned to tell them about the promotion. I had imagined my father's face when I said senior structural engineer. I had rehearsed the exact words. I had hoped. That, in the end, is the thing that breaks you. Not the accumulating disappointments, not the years of ledger entries, not even the moment itself. What breaks you is the hope you cannot seem to stop bringing with you, wrapped up and labeled just as carefully as the gifts in the bag. I came back downstairs. The Christmas morning continued around me like a film I was watching from several feet outside my own body. Amber went out to sit in the Ferrari and revved the engine once, the sound of it absurdly loud and out of place on the quiet residential street, a sound that belonged to a racetrack, not a Denver suburb in December. My father laughed and went to stand in the driveway and look at it. My mother refilled everyone's coffee. I ate a piece of coffee cake and said appropriate things when spoken to. I did not mention the promotion. The 3 gift certificates sat on the coffee table next to the remains of the wrapping paper clipped together. At dinner that evening, my mother asked me if I was feeling all right. I said yes, just tired from the drive. She nodded and turned to ask Amber what color she was thinking for the Ferrari's interior trim. At 10:30, I excused myself. I said I had an early start. My father said drive safe, still looking at his phone. I lay in my childhood bedroom for 3.5 hours. The bedroom that still has the same comforter it had when I was 17, a pattern of faded yellow and white that I have always hated. I lay on top of it and stared at the ceiling, and I listened to my parents and Amber in the living room, laughing, planning her first long drive in the new car, debating whether to take it to Aspen for New Year's, wondering about the best routes for showing it off in the mountains. The sounds were not cruel. That is almost the hardest part to explain. They were not celebrating while consciously excluding me. They had simply, effortlessly, completely, forgotten I was in the house. At 2:17 in the morning, I sat up. I did not make this decision dramatically. I did not feel a surge of righteous energy or a liberating rush of clarity. I felt very calm and very tired and very certain of one thing, which was that I could not spend one more night in that house. Not because I was punishing anyone. Not because I had a plan. Simply because something had reached its limit, quietly and without announcement, the way a rope reaches its limit, and staying would require me to pretend it hadn't. I packed quickly and with great selectivity. I took the stuffed bear my grandmother gave me when I was 7, worn smooth at the ears. I took the photo album from my college years, the one I had put together myself and never shown anyone. I took the small wooden box that holds the first structural blueprint I ever drew, a hand-drafted load diagram for my sophomore year engineering class that my professor had called exceptional. And I took the 3 gift certificates from the coffee table. I did not know yet why I took them. Something in me simply understood they were mine, that they were the most honest record of the evening, and that I was not leaving them behind to be tidied away and forgotten like everything else. I left all the expensive gifts I had brought where they were, still on the table in the living room. They had been given with love and they could stay or be thrown away or be forgotten about. That was no longer something I needed to manage. My house key sat cold in my palm for a moment. I set it on the kitchen counter next to the coffee maker that was programmed to brew in 3 hours. The streets of Denver at 2:30 in the morning have a particular quality of emptiness that is different from the emptiness of night in a smaller city. The streetlights turned the snowbanks pale orange. The road had been plowed but a thin new layer was accumulating, and my tires made a soft, compressed sound against it. I turned the radio on and the first thing that played was a Christmas song, the warm, nostalgic kind, the kind written for people who have the version of Christmas that looks like a movie, and I turned it off immediately. I said, very quietly, to the empty passenger seat, "Merry Christmas, Ellie." My voice cracked on the last word. I let it. By 6 in the morning, I was somewhere in southern Colorado, the mountains beginning to flatten into the high plains, and my phone was showing 17 missed calls and 31 text messages, all from the last 2 hours. My mother first, "Did you forget something?" Then, "Ellie, where did you go?" Then calls from my father. Then a text from Amber that said simply, "Seriously." At that point I turned off notifications for all 3 of them and drove. The first message that got through was from my mother, at 6:45, which I saw when I stopped for gas near Walsenburg. She was not asking where I was or whether I was safe. She was asking whether I had remembered to call the landlord about renewing the lease on the cabin in Breckenridge, a cabin my parents own and Amber uses for Instagram photo shoots, before I left Austin. A semi-truck had passed me somewhere north of Pueblo and thrown a wall of slush across my windshield, and for 3 or 4 seconds of pure blindness, with my hands rigid on the wheel waiting for the wipers to clear it, I had thought, this is what my life looks like. Just waiting for the spray to clear so you can see the road again. The second call that I let reach me was from Marco. Marco Reyes and I have been friends since the first week of our freshman year at the University of Colorado, when we ended up at the same table in a campus dining hall and spent 2 hours arguing about whether a building could be both structurally honest and aesthetically surprising. He is an environmental engineer now, based in Austin, one of those people who came into your life at the exact right moment and has never once given you a reason to doubt him. He called at 7:15 and I answered because I needed to hear a voice that was not performing anything. "Where are you?" His voice was warm and completely awake in the way it always is, regardless of the hour. He has always been one of those people who sounds most like himself at inconvenient times. "Somewhere in southern Colorado," I said. Driving south. To where? I don't know. There was a pause that was not uncomfortable. Then, come to Austin. You're already heading the right direction. Come back and stay with me and Elena until you figure out the next thing. Marco's wife Elena is a landscape architect who makes extraordinary tamales and has the most efficient and genuine laugh of anyone I have ever met. Their guest room has a window that faces east, which means morning light, which I had not even known I needed until he said that. I can't impose on you both like that, I said. He made a sound that communicated exactly how much he thought of that response. You have spent your entire adult life being the helper. Let someone help you for once. His voice carried no impatience, no performance of generosity, just the simple, clean fact of it. I said, okay. He said, text me every hour, drive careful. Elena's already making up the room. The call ended. I sat in the parking lot of the gas station for a moment, engine running, heater blowing, watching a family in a minivan pull in from the highway with luggage strapped to their roof. Christmas morning. Somewhere other people were unwrapping things they had asked for. Somewhere there were houses full of the particular warm noise of people who were glad to be together. I pulled back onto the highway and drove south, and for the first time since leaving Denver, my shoulders came down slightly from where they had been living, somewhere around my ears. If you are still with me, I want to pause here for just a moment. Type the number 1 in the comments if this story is reaching something in you. I will be reading every single one. The diner appeared about 40 miles north of the New Mexico border, a low building with a gravel parking lot and a neon open sign that glowed amber in the gray morning light. I had not eaten since the previous afternoon. I pulled in. Inside it was warm in the specific, enveloping way that diners are warm, coffee and bacon grease and the low hum of a heating system that has been doing its job for 20 years without complaint. I was the only customer. A woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back and a name tag that said Dorothy came to my table with a coffee pot and filled the mug that was already there without asking. She took one look at my face and did not say anything unnecessary. Long drive, she said finally. Something like that. She set the pot down on the table across from me and leaned against the counter. Family. I laughed, which surprised both of us. Yeah. She nodded with the particular nod of someone who has heard a great many true things said in very few words. Blood makes you related, she said. Love and respect make you family. I've been saying that to people in this diner for 35 years. Hand me that back when you're done if it helps. I ordered the breakfast special and wrapped both hands around the mug and watched the snow falling in the parking lot outside. Dorothy's words turned themselves over in my mind like something I was trying to fit into a structure I was building. Blood makes you related. Love and respect make you family. For 34 years I had been related to the Morrison family, and I had spent all 34 of those years working, quietly and without acknowledgement, to earn the second part of that equation from people who had already decided it only applied to one of their daughters. In my coat pocket were 3 paper gift certificates, each worth $5, paper clipped together with a small gold clip. Maybe it was time to find out what the second part felt like when it was freely given. I arrived in Austin 2 days after Christmas. Marco and Elena had put fresh flowers on the nightstand in the guest room, which is the kind of detail that either means nothing or means everything, depending on who you are. I stood in the doorway of that room for a moment before I went in, and I thought about the guest room in my parents' house, which still had my old track team ribbons tacked to a corkboard and a desk lamp with a broken switch, and the comparison was so stark that it almost made me laugh again, that wild surprised laugh from the diner. My phone had accumulated 49 missed calls and 63 text messages by the time I turned notifications back on. I read them in one sitting at Marco's kitchen table with a cup of coffee, the way you read a document you need to understand before you can respond to it. The pattern in the messages was clear. The first wave, Christmas morning, was confusion. How could you leave without saying anything? Where did you go? The second wave, the following day, was the beginning of something darker, the first hints of the tactic that would develop fully over the coming weeks, framing my departure as something I had done to them, rather than something I had done for myself. Your father is very upset. Your sister is worried about you. Do you know how this looks to the rest of the family? My father's voicemail, retrieved on the second day, began with, Elaine Elizabeth Morrison, I do not know what has gotten into you, but this behavior ends now. If you do not call us back by this evening, I am going to report your car stolen. My car. My name on the title. My paid-off, 7-year-old Toyota Camry that I had driven myself across 2 states. He was going to report it stolen. I sat with that for a while, feeling the specific quality of it, the instinctive reach for authority and control, the reflexive certainty that he had the right to compel me back. I thought about what it meant that his first response to my absence was not concern for my safety but a legal threat about a car. His daughter's car. The car she bought herself, while his other daughter's Ferrari sat in the driveway with a satin bow. My mother's voicemail, from roughly the same time, Ellie, my blood pressure has been dangerously elevated since you left. The doctor says the stress is very serious. I need you to call me and let me know you're coming home. Is this what you want? For me to end up in the hospital? I have thought about that message many times since. The particular precision of it, the medical detail, the direct question, the placement of responsibility. Is this what you want? As if my leaving had been an act of aggression against her body rather than an act of basic survival for my own mind. I deleted both messages without responding. My finger hovered over the screen for a moment before I did it, that old instinct, the 34-year-old muscle memory of moving quickly to fix whatever had gone wrong, to smooth it over, to make myself small enough to stop taking up space they needed, and then I deleted them anyway. On Monday morning, 3 days after Christmas, I sent an email to my firm's HR department requesting a transfer to our Austin office, which had been growing for 2 years and had recently been looking for senior structural engineers. I had the credentials. I had the project record. I had a performance review from 18 months prior that my supervisor had described as outstanding in 3 separate categories. I rewrote the email 14 times. I sent it before I could rewrite it a 15th. 3 hours later, I had the approval in my inbox. Marco brought me coffee when I came out of the guest room holding my laptop and looking, apparently, like someone who had just received news from a different universe. You got it? He asked. I start in 3 weeks, I said. He pulled me into a hug that was brief and genuine and entirely without ceremony, which is exactly how Marco does everything. Elena appeared in the kitchen doorway and, once she understood what had happened, made a sound of pure delight that startled their cat off the counter. She called someone named Benedetta from her architecture network who managed residential units in a neighborhood called Travis Heights, rent-controlled, safe building, a 15-minute bike ride from my new office. By that evening, I had a lease to sign. You didn't have to do all of this, I said to Marco, feeling the strange prickling behind my eyes that happens when kindness arrives in a form you have not been expecting. He sat down across from me at the kitchen table and looked at me with the direct, uncomplicated way he has always had. You have been taking care of other people your whole life, he said. You know how to receive help. You've just been in a situation where no one offered it. Those are different things. No strings attached, Elena added from the kitchen. Novel concept, I know. I laughed. It came out a little fractured at the edges, which was honest. The next day, Marco drove me to an appointment with a therapist he had looked up. Dr. Sylvia Winters, Family Dynamics and Workplace Resilience. He waited in the parking lot the whole hour. When I came out, he was on a work call, but he ended it when he saw me, and on the way home he did not ask me anything about the session, just asked if I was hungry, and when I said yes, he drove to a taco place on South Congress and bought me 3 tacos and sat across from me while I ate them, talking about a water reclamation project he was working on, giving me something neutral and interesting to orient myself around. I thought, sitting across from him over those tacos, this is what it feels like. This is what people mean when they talk about being supported. I had read about this the way you read about a city you have never visited. I was sitting in it now. Dr. Winter's office smelled like old books and lemonwood polish, and she had the particular quality of stillness that good therapists have, the kind that makes a room feel larger than it is. She did not rush to fill silences. She let them sit between us like furniture, useful and unobtrusive, until I found the words I needed. In our first session, I said the word favoritism out loud, probably for the first time in my adult life. I said it and then sat with the sound of it for a moment, the way you sit with a piece of evidence you have been carrying around in your coat pocket for years and have finally placed on a table. And how did that make you feel? She asked. Like I was worth $15 at a discount store, I said. While my sister was worth a Ferrari. She wrote something down. The room was very quiet. What followed, over the next several weeks, was the slow and genuinely uncomfortable work of examining something I had spent 34 years treating as the weather, just a condition, just the way things were, nothing to be done about it, and learning to look at it instead as a choice. A sustained, consistent, years-long series of choices that other people had made, not about who I was, but about who they had decided to prioritize. Learning that distinction between what had been done and what it meant about me took longer than I expected and hurt in ways I had not anticipated. Dr. Winters said something in our third session that I have turned over in my mind many times since. She said, the role you were assigned in your family was not a reflection of your value. It was a reflection of their limitations. The two things have nothing to do with each other. Your job now is to spend some time learning that in your bones, not just in your head. I was beginning to understand the difference. My apartment in Travis Heights was 640 square feet, with a kitchen barely wide enough to open the oven and a bathroom with a pedestal sink and no storage. The west-facing windows caught the afternoon light and threw long rectangles of it across the hardwood floors. I bought a futon, a lamp with a good shade, and a small desk. Nothing else for a while. The emptiness felt chosen rather than insufficient. Space I was growing into. On the desk, in a small ceramic bowl I bought at a flea market for $3, I put the 3 gift certificates. Still paper clipped together. I was not ready to decide what they meant yet. For now they just sat there, a fact. Marco had mentioned offhand, in the first week, that there was a pottery studio in my neighborhood that offered beginner classes on Saturday mornings. He said it the way he says most things, without pressure or agenda, just dropping it into the air in case it was useful. I resisted for 2 weeks and then went, mostly because Dr. Winters had mentioned that working with your hands does something to the nervous system that talking cannot always reach. The instructor was a small woman in her 50s named Patricia, with gray hair and paint on her wrists, who moved around the room very quietly and said things to each student that were calibrated exactly to what that student needed to hear. To me, on my first morning, when I was fighting the clay with the focused intensity one applied to everything, she put her hands over mine and said, "Don't argue with it. Ask it what it wants to be." I thought about that for a long time after. About all the things in my life I had been arguing with instead of asking. By the end of the first class I had made a small, lopsided bowl with walls of uneven thickness and a rim that was not quite level. It was objectively poor work. I carried it home on the passenger seat like something precious. The calls from my family did not stop. They evolved, over the weeks, through their several phases. In the first phase, confusion and demands. In the second, concern that was difficult to distinguish from accusation. In the third, which arrived sometime in mid-January, the strategic deployment of extended family. My Uncle Pete called to say that family was the most important thing a person had and that grudges only hurt the person holding them. My father's sister Judith sent an email about the healing power of forgiveness, with 3 scripture references. My cousin Vanessa's fiancé, a man I had met exactly twice, sent me a Facebook message about how much Vanessa wanted the whole family together for the wedding. The coordination of it had a particular quality. It was too precisely timed, too distributed across too many people who had never previously shown any interest in my emotional state, to be coincidental. I mentioned it to Dr. Winters. She nodded. She had a term for it. I won't use the term here because I think naming things can sometimes become a way of avoiding the feeling underneath them, but what I will say is that understanding the pattern did not make it hurt less. It just made it legible. I was not returning calls. I was managing the silence carefully, in the way you manage the space around something that is still sharp. At the office, none of this existed. My new team knew me only through my work, the precision of my calculations, the way I ran a meeting, the fact that I had a habit of staying 20 minutes late to walk the model one more time before sending it to the client. My supervisor, a tall methodical man named Carlos Benner, stopped by my desk in my third week to say that the Rodriguez Tower preliminary designs were the strongest he had seen come through the department in 2 years. I thanked him and turned back to my screen and thought, this is the thing they never took from me. Whatever they diminished at home, they never took this. 7 months after Christmas, my apartment had changed. Pottery covered the windowsills, each piece a little more refined than the one before it. Patricia had told me in April that I had a natural understanding of negative space, which is apparently not as common as you would think, and I had held on to that the way you hold on to something true about yourself that you have never been able to prove. A proper bed had replaced the futon. The walls had art, prints I had chosen slowly, one at a time, not filling the space all at once but letting the room tell me what it wanted. And on the bookshelf by the window, in a place where I could see it from the kitchen table, sat a long white envelope. Over the months since Christmas, each week I had taken a gift certificate, the $5 kind, from the same discount home goods chain, bought at the register near my apartment, and slipped it into the envelope. 1 per week, 32 of them by now, corners overlapping, the small stack of them growing into something that had weight, not as bitterness, as a record, the way an engineer keeps a logbook. 1 entry per week, in the currency my family had decided was my value, accumulating into evidence. It had started as something almost accidental. I had been standing in line at a pharmacy near my apartment, seen a rack of the same gift certificates near the register, and bought one without entirely knowing why. Then another the following week, and the week after that. Eventually I understood what I was doing. I was building a document. Something I could put on a table. When the ivory envelope arrived in my mailbox, I recognized Vanessa's handwriting on the outside before I had even registered what it was. I set it on the kitchen counter and left it there for 3 days. Cousin Vanessa's wedding invitation. My name in careful calligraphy. No +1. Just, Elaine Morrison. Expected to return, solo, to the family. I brought it to Dr. Winters' office without having opened it. She watched me set it on the end table beside the couch and asked me what I was feeling. I said I was feeling the way I imagine a person feels when they have been away from a very loud place for a long time and someone is suggesting they go back. Are you going? She asked. I had been thinking about nothing else for 3 days. I'm going, I said. On my own terms. She leaned forward slightly. Tell me what that means. It means I booked a room at the Hilton 4 blocks from the venue. It means I am not staying in the rental house with my parents and Amber. It means I am not arriving a day early for what my father has already called family time in a voicemail I have not returned. It means I have one conversation I need to have, and I have a folder, and I have 7 months of therapy, and I am going. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What are you most afraid of?" "Going back to being who I was before I left." She nodded. "And what would tell you that you haven't?" I thought about it. I thought about the woman who drove away from Denver at 2:17 in the morning, hollow-eyed and certain of nothing except that she couldn't stay. I thought about what she would have done if she had gone to that wedding. The apologizing, the managing, the performing of a family dynamic she no longer believed in. If I walk out of that building feeling the same size I walked in, I said, I'll know. I flew out of Austin Bergstrom with a small carry-on and a midnight blue silk dress in a garment bag and the quiet, controlled energy of someone who has been preparing for something for 7 months. In my bag, beside the dress, was the white envelope. 32 gift certificates, fanned slightly, still in their paper-clipped groupings of 3. I had spent 2 evenings the week before organizing them carefully inside a clear document sleeve, the way I organize project files before a client presentation. They were evidence. I intended to use them as such. Marco had pressed a small smooth stone into my hand at the departure drop-off, dark blue granite, cool and solid, one flat face. "Elena picked it out," he said. "She said you'd know why. Strength isn't about the absence of fear," Elena had told him for me. "It's about feeling the fear and walking forward anyway." I was standing on the sidewalk outside the rehearsal dinner venue, in the December cold, when I reached into my pocket and held the stone for a moment. The restaurant was a converted Victorian with warm light visible through the tall windows. I could see silhouettes moving inside. I straightened my shoulders and pulled open the door. The room went quiet in the specific way rooms go quiet when someone walks through a door and the air changes slightly. I recognized the quality of the silence because I had seen it happen to other people, walking into rooms where they were unexpected. I had never experienced it from the inside before. I was wearing tailored black trousers, an emerald silk blouse, and heels that made a clear, unhurried sound on the hardwood floor. My hair was down. I was wearing small diamond stud earrings that I had bought myself with my first paycheck as a senior structural engineer. I scanned the room without rushing toward anyone. I nodded at the faces I recognized. I did not perform relief at being back. I did not perform apology for having been away. I simply arrived, the way a person arrives in a room when they have decided they belong in it. My mother's hand went to her throat. My father's glass paused halfway to his mouth. Amber, standing near the bar, looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before, something that took me a moment to identify because it was so entirely unlike her usual presentation. She looked uncertain. She reached me first, which surprised me. She crossed the room in the quick, slightly effortful way of someone who is trying to get there before they lose their nerve, and she said, "You look incredible," and spread her arms for a hug. I accepted it briefly and stepped back, maintaining the distance between us with the particular calm that 7 months of practice had given me. "How is the Ferrari?" I asked. Her eyes moved away from mine to somewhere over my shoulder. They came and got it," she said. 3 months ago. I have a Honda Civic now. More practical, honestly." She said this last part quietly, with none of the breezy confidence of someone delivering a lifestyle update. She said it the way a person says something they have practiced saying because the true version of the story is too humiliating to lead with at a cocktail party. She said it like she was testing whether I would be kind about it. I looked at her for a moment, this person I had known my entire life, who I had resented and pitted and loved in complicated measure for 34 years, and I saw, maybe for the first time, that she had also been shaped by something she hadn't chosen. Not the way I had been shaped. Not with the same consequences. But shaped nonetheless, by being given everything and therefore learning nothing about her own resilience. A Ferrari repossessed is a particular kind of public education. I wondered what she had learned from it. "That sounds like a good call," I said. Beyond her shoulder, I could see my parents in conversation with my Aunt Martha, and I could see, even from across the room, that something about my father's posture had changed. He was standing differently than I had ever seen him stand. Less expansive. Smaller somehow, in a way that was not physical. My cousin Tara materialized at my elbow, vodka tonic in hand, with the bright, slightly conspiratorial energy she always has at family gatherings. "God, I am so glad you're here," she said quietly. "There is so much you don't know." She leaned in. "Your parents are selling the house. Medical bills, they're saying, but," she lowered her voice another register, "everyone knows they've been floating Amber for years. The Ferrari, the studio rent, all of it." Reality finally caught up. A waiter circulated with champagne. I took a glass and let the information settle around me without reaching out to grip it. I watched the bubbles rise through the pale gold liquid and thought, what rises eventually surfaces. My father found me during cocktail hour. He had been working toward me all evening, I could see it, orbiting closer conversation by conversation, and when he finally reached me, he had the bourbon-warmed look of a man who has been preparing a speech. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Family sticks together, Ellie. Whatever happens. That's what we do." I looked at him. I held his gaze without effort and without anger, which felt like a new thing I had built and did not know I had finished building until I was standing on it. "Does it?" I said. "Or is that something you say about the members of the family who already receive everything, so that the ones who don't feel obligated to keep showing up?" His face reddened. "We have always supported you," he said. "We have always." $15 in gift certificates to a discount store, I said. The words came out quieter than I expected. Not a shout, not an accusation, just a plain and specific fact. "That was your definition of support for me, Dad. On the same morning you handed Amber the keys to a car that cost more than I earn in a year. That was what you decided I was worth." He opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked, for a moment, like a man who has walked into a room where the furniture has been rearranged and cannot find where he expected to stand. Then he turned and walked toward the bar. In the restroom, my mother appeared at the mirror beside me while I was washing my hands. Her eyes were wet in the particular, controlled way of a woman who has learned to deploy tears precisely. She reached for my hand and said, "We miss you so much. You have no idea how much we miss you." I kept washing my hands. The soap was cold and smelled like eucalyptus. "I miss who I thought you were, too," I said. I said it without cruelty and without performance. I said it because it was the most honest thing I had available. The conversation on the terrace, with Amber, happened just before the dinner was called. She pulled me outside and the December air was cold and still, and below the terrace a garden was dormant, all bare branches and frozen soil, waiting for something that had not arrived yet. She was gripping the railing with both hands. She did not ease into it. She just turned to face me and said, "They repossessed the Ferrari in October. In the parking lot of a grocery store." She laughed, once, briefly, a sound that had nothing of warmth in it. There were people around. A woman with a stroller watched them take it. Amber paused. I didn't know that could happen so fast. I said nothing. I let her continue. The design clients dried up. Dad lost his job before he could help, not that he had much left to help with anyway. I didn't know. She stopped, and when she started again her voice had lost its polish entirely. The performance dropped like a coat she was too tired to keep wearing. I didn't know how much of everything was coming from them. I thought that was just how things worked. You wanted something, and the money appeared. I never asked where it came from. I never had to. The confession settled between us in the cold air. 7 months earlier, I would have already been calculating. Already thinking about what I could offer, how much I could absorb, whether there was a way to fix this that would let her avoid the full weight of it. That version of me would have been reaching into her coat for her phone to start looking at her bank balance before Amber had finished the sentence. Instead, I placed my hand briefly on her arm. "That sounds genuinely hard," I said. "I mean that. I'm sorry you're going through it." Her eyes widened slightly, adjusting to the texture of what I was offering, which was compassion without rescue. She had never received that combination from me before. I had never been able to offer it. "I can help you put together a budget," I said. "A real one, if you want to actually work through it. But I can't carry this for you. That part is yours to figure out." She stood with that for a moment. Something crossed her face that I could not fully name, whether it was disappointment or relief or something more complicated, the first stirring of a self-sufficiency she had never been required to develop. She did not argue with me. She did not cry. She turned back toward the garden and looked at it for a while. I think that was the beginning of something for her. I did not know yet what it would become, but I did not try to fill the silence, and she did not ask me to. The wedding ceremony was at a chapel in Washington Park, and the December light through the stained glass turned the whole interior a warm amber that felt like a gift from the weather. I sat in my assigned seat, which, I knew from Vanessa's accidentally forwarded seating chart, had originally been placed between my parents and directly across from Amber, the family tableau restored, everyone back in their positions, and instead I was sitting beside Vanessa's college roommate and a kind, voluble man named Gregory who was a friend of the groom's and who spent the processional whispering gentle commentary about the flower arrangements that made me work very hard to keep my face composed. I had called Vanessa 2 weeks before the wedding and asked, quietly, for a small adjustment to the seating. She had paused for only a moment before saying yes. She knew. Cousins always know. The ceremony was beautiful in the way weddings are beautiful when the two people getting married are visibly, unselfconsciously glad to be there. Watching them, I thought about all the things that have to be built before you can stand in front of other people and make that kind of promise. All the work, invisible to an audience, that makes the visible moment possible. I thought about what I was building. The library of the venue, 30 minutes before the ceremony, was where they found me. Aunt Martha had come to the bridal suite first, gently, with her hand on my forearm, the soft warning of someone who already knew what was waiting and felt bad about being the one to deliver it. "Your parents want to see you in the library. They said it's important, before the ceremony. I looked at her and she looked back with the particular helpless honesty of a woman caught between competing loyalties, and I said, "Thank you, Martha. I'll be there in a few minutes." I helped Vanessa with her veil first. I pinned the last loop of tulle and she looked at her reflection and something settled in her face, the acceptance of a moment that had finally arrived after a long approach, and I thought, I know that feeling. Not from the same circumstance, but from the same place inside it. The library door was heavy. I pushed it open. My mother was in a high-backed chair with tissues already deployed. My father stood by the fireplace. Amber was at the window, in a dress I recognized as good quality but wearing it differently than she used to. Something about the way she held herself and it had changed. The careless ownership of someone who expected the dress to do the work for her had been replaced by something more effortful, the way people hold themselves when they are trying to stand up straight because they know they need to and not because it comes naturally. I closed the door behind me and stood with my back to it. My mother rose. "Ellie, thank God. We need to talk, all of us, as a family." She opened her arms. I remained where I was. "The ceremony starts in 35 minutes, I said. "I'm listening." My father gestured to the empty chair. "Sit down, Ellie. This is important." "I'm fine here." He cleared his throat. "There have been some significant changes since Christmas. My position at the company was eliminated 3 months ago. Budget restructuring, nothing personal. And your mother has been working through some health challenges." "Anxiety," my mother supplied, dabbing carefully at her eyes. "The doctor says it has been severely aggravated by the stress of this situation." Amber stepped forward. "This has gone on long enough, Ellie. Whatever point you were trying to make, you've made it. Now we need you to come home." I looked at all three of them. I thought about the white envelope in my bag. I took my time crossing to the indicated chair and sat down with my spine straight and my bag on my knee. I reached inside and took out the photo album I had brought from Austin, assembled over the previous 3 months from photographs I had scanned and printed and organized, going back decades. I opened it on my lap. The first page had 2 photographs side by side. The first was from Amber's 4th birthday party, the pony, the castle cake, the 30 children in party hats. The photograph next to it was for my 5th birthday, the kitchen table, the grocery store cake, 2 friends, paper plates. I had found it in a box of old prints at my grandmother's house and had it scanned. "I don't have time for a photo album," my father said. "You called this meeting," I said. "So we have time." I turned the pages slowly. Graduation photographs, holiday mornings, family vacations where the pattern was unmistakable once you knew to look for it. My family sat with the album's evidence without speaking. My father's face moved through several expressions: defensiveness, a flash of something that might have been recognition, and then the retreat back into the position of a man who has decided not to be moved. "We always treated you girls equally," he said, when I paused on a page. "You know we did." I reached into my bag and took out a folder. Inside it were documents I had assembled carefully over several weeks, a summary of my student loan amounts and repayment history, a printout of what a year in Barcelona costs, a timeline of my father's salary and promotion history during the years I was in college, public record, available through the company's annual filings, the bonus information available through a contact at my firm who knew the industry. I put them on the coffee table one at a time. I did not put them there to wound. I put them there because I was done allowing vague assurances to substitute for specific facts. "You had the money," I said, "when I was in college. Not unlimited money, but enough to help me the way you helped Amber. You chose not to." My mother's tears arrived in earnest now, genuine ones, the kind that come when the story you have been telling yourself for a long time is interrupted by a fact that will not be reclassified. "We didn't know," she said. "We didn't realize how it looked from where you were standing." I thought about that. About the particular, sustained cruelty of being on the receiving end of something for 34 years and being told it was invisible from the other side. About all the times I had tried to say something and been told I was overreacting, or too sensitive, or that I was always fine anyway. I looked at my mother and I said something I had never said before, in exactly those words. "Not knowing doesn't erase the impact. You may not have intended to make me feel like I was worth less than Amber. But that is what I felt, and for 34 years, no one in this room ever once asked whether I was okay." The room held the silence. I reached into my bag one final time. I took out the white envelope. I set it on the coffee table between us and opened the flap and tipped it. 32 gift certificates came out in a slow fan across the glass surface, the paper kind, $5 each, from a discount home goods chain, the same chain my parents had given me those first 3 for Christmas. They spread across the table like playing cards, triple $5, a cascade of them, overlapping, covering the financial documents underneath. The gold paper clips caught the light from the fireplace. The room was completely silent. "I saved one every week since Christmas," I said. "The same kind you gave me, $5 each, from the same store. One for every week that I was building something on my own, not as punishment, as a record." 1 entry per week in the currency you decided was my value. My father stared at the table. He reached out and picked up one of the certificates, turned it over, and set it back down. His face, for a moment, was entirely undefended. The careful architecture of his self-assurance was simply absent, and what was underneath it was older and much less certain, the face of a man beginning to understand something he is not going to be able to undo. My mother pressed her tissue against her mouth and looked at the spread of certificates across the table and did not say anything for a long time. Amber, at the window, had her arms crossed against her chest. When she finally spoke, her voice was very quiet. I never thought about what it looked like from your side, she said. Any of it. I thought that was how it was, that you were fine and I needed more. I never questioned it. She was not asking for forgiveness. She was just saying what was true. I recognized the texture of it because I had been learning, for 7 months, how to do the same thing. I don't want apologies, I said, looking at all 3 of them. Not today, and not in the abstract. What I want is change. Real, specific, sustained change, and because I am a structural engineer and I think in systems, I am going to tell you exactly what that means. I will consider reconciliation under 2 conditions. The first is family therapy, all of us, with a therapist I help select. The second is that my boundaries are treated as real. Not negotiated around. Not handled by sending Uncle Pete and Aunt Judith to call me on your behalf. My father opened his mouth. My mother put her hand on his arm. We'll do it, she said. Her voice was steadier than it had been at any point in the conversation. Both of us. Whatever it takes. I looked at her for a long moment, reading the quality of the words, testing them against 34 years of data. The gift certificates lay between us on the table. We'll see, I said. And I meant it as neither threat nor promise, but as the only honest response to people who were beginning, perhaps, to understand the distance between what they intended and what they had done. I gathered the album and the folder and stood. I left the certificates on the table. Those are yours to keep, I said. A reminder of what it costs when you love your children differently. At the door, I paused with my hand on the knob. I have a seat at the ceremony, I said. And a friend saving me a place. Behind me, I heard Amber say something very quietly to our parents. She's different now. She was right. The woman who had tucked 3 paper gift certificates into her coat pocket at 2:17 in the morning and driven south into a Denver snowstorm was not this woman. That woman was running on the last thin vapor of 34 years of endurance. This woman was standing on ground she had built herself, 1 week at a time, over 7 months of early mornings and therapy and lopsided pottery and the daily practice of deciding what she was and was not willing to accept. She had been there all along, underneath the role. She had simply needed the space to finish becoming herself. 1 year after Christmas, I am in my Austin apartment, and the afternoon light is coming through the west-facing windows the way it does in December, long and golden and slow, and the table is set for 8 people. Marco and Elena are here. Patricia from the pottery studio, who has become a genuine and uncomplicated friend. 3 colleagues from the firm, including Carlos Benner, who mentioned last week that the Rodriguez Tower has been shortlisted for a Regional Engineering Excellence Award, and Elliot Marsh, an environmental engineer I met at a project kickoff last spring, who showed up at my door this morning with flowers he had clearly agonized over and who has, over 6 months of coffee and long walks along the river and conversations that routinely go 4 hours without either of us noticing, become something I am still finding the right words for, not the bright, immediately legible thing of new infatuation, but something steadier and more structural, the kind of thing that holds weight. When he first asked me to coffee, 7 months ago, I almost said no, not because I did not want to go. Because the old instinct said, you don't have time for this, you don't deserve this, someone will need something from you and this will be the thing that gets sacrificed. I mentioned it to Dr. Winters and she said, notice that. Accepting care is a skill. You have had very few opportunities to practice it. I said yes. I practiced. Marco raises a glass. To Ellie, he says, who engineers things that stand. Buildings and, it turns out, lives. I shake my head, which is my way of accepting a compliment without deflecting it. I'm learning the difference between those 2 gestures and I am not always sure I have them right yet, but I am learning. My phone buzzes during dessert. Monthly call from Amber. We established the cadence after the wedding, one of the conditions of the slow and incremental work of figuring out what, if anything, our relationship can be. I answer at the kitchen counter while Elliot handles the dishes, which I asked him to do, which is still a slightly new sensation, asking for help without immediately apologizing for needing it. Merry Christmas, Amber says. Her apartment visible behind her is smaller than the last one, nothing designer in it, and there is evidence of actual work on the desk behind her, a drawing tablet, reference books stacked unevenly, the productive disorder of someone who is building a client base without anyone building it for her. She is working 2 jobs. She has mentioned this without complaint, which is itself a change. You look happy, she says. Your place looks beautiful. It feels like mine, I say. She adjusts the camera and our parents appear in frame, sitting in a modest apartment I have not visited. They sold the Denver house 4 months ago. My father looks smaller than I remember, but not diminished the way I might once have expected. Smaller in the way of a man who has put something down that he was carrying incorrectly for a long time. He has been sober for 90 days. He wanted me to know that. Amber had texted the previous week. He's working on it. I am not ready to process that fully. But I am keeping a space for it, the way you keep a space in a structure for something that will bear weight later. My mother is volunteering at a community food pantry 3 mornings a week. She wanted to be on the call but there was an emergency distribution this morning. She's sorry she missed it. I noted the texture of that, someone choosing a commitment to strangers over a call she wanted to be on, and I filed it in the column I am building, the one where I put the evidence of people trying. We talk for 20 minutes. We say goodbye. I stand at the kitchen window for a moment after the call ends, watching the December light on the rooftops of Travis Heights. Elliot appears beside me, drying his hands on a dish towel. How was it? He asks. Better, I say. Getting better. He puts his arm around my shoulders and I lean into it, which is also still a slightly new sensation, the allowing of it, without immediately calculating what I owe in return. We stand at the window and look at the city. On the bookshelf, where I can see it from anywhere in the room, sits the white envelope. Still sealed, now. I sealed it after the wedding and I have not opened it since. Inside are the 32 gift certificates and the 3 original ones from Christmas morning, 35 in total, $175 in $5 increments. I am not going to spend them. I am not going to throw them away. I am going to let them sit there, the way I keep the first blueprint in the wooden box and the lopsided first bowl from Patricia's class on the windowsill even though everything I have made since is better. There are things you keep not because they are pleasant but because they are true. Because they are the evidence of where you started, and starting is not nothing. Starting, when the road is dark and you have 3 paper gift certificates and a 7-hour drive ahead of you and nothing except the certainty that you cannot stay, is everything. Worth isn't something you find at the end. It is something you claim, 1 week at a time, by knowing, really knowing, in the place that is past argument, what you will and will not accept. I know now. The table is full of people who chose to be here. That is the whole thing.